morning from Bahrain, and welcome everybody for joining us today. And I lost my connection. So thank you for joining us here today in the Internet Day Bahrain for 2020. I would like first of all to greet His Excellency Engineer Kamal bin Ahmed Mohammed, the patron of the event, for his continuous and ongoing support. His support is always appreciated. I would like to welcome all our participants, wherever you are, from all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, again, good morning. And my name is Ahmed Al-Hajari. I'm the president of the Internet Society Bahrain Chapter. And I'll be happy to introduce the opening ceremony. And we will start by a very short opening speech. Of course, okay, I hope you can hear me properly now. Sorry, there was. So again, good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me now. You can write on the board if you want to tell me anything. That's the easiest way. So basically, this Internet Society Bahrain Chapter was established in 2001. It has started with a short trip that me and my colleague Khalid Al-Khatib and our colleague Arif Al-Rouai went to the INET week in Stockholm, and we met ISOC at that time, membership and manager. And at that time, in 2001, in Stockholm, we announced establishment of the Internet Society, the Bahrain chapter. And things have gone a long way. I've stayed away a little bit from the internet, and I gave it a focus on starting the business. We are back. The Internet Society is back to business, and Internet Day for us is very important to launch a number of ongoing events. The global internet continues to grow around the world, but for sure we are also growing with it, and we see many application and implementation wherever we go. The Internet Society itself has their effort have made increasingly effective increase in terms of reach, reliability, and all their projects have resulted in great things that we've seen today: a reliable internet where everybody is able to work from home, hold his conferences, or even study from home. So what's the purpose of our meeting today? The Internet Day really aims to promote and increase the awareness of the initiatives headed by and implemented by Internet Society Bahrain. We require the connection with Internet Society Global, so thank you for supporting it and joining with us today. And we'll talk about internet evolution, development, and uses of technical and commercial and other social activities. We have great speakers with us, 3 sessions. I will hope that you will be attending all or some of them and effectively participate in this Internet Day. I would like also to thank our supporters and sponsors. So specifically the Internet Society Global for their support and all their work in terms of experts. Bahrain Technology Company Society, which we as Internet Chapter Bahrain falls under BTEC. And of course, Work Smart for events management for doing a great job and managing the event and all the team. And of course, the Ministry of Transportation and Telecom, headed by His Excellency Kamal bin Ahmed, who is always a supporter for us, and the great team with the great support we got from his team also. Now, unfortunately, His Excellency is not able to join us today, as he was called for a very urgent meeting, and he conveys his regards, and we are honored at least to have a voice message from him. So we'll go to the voice message of His Excellency the Minister.
the Internet Day, and allow me first to take this opportunity to thank the organizer, the Internet Society Bahrain Chapter and the Global Internet Society for inviting me and for bringing such distinguished speakers and participants to discuss an important subject and to discuss about the existing and the future role of Internet to the global economic and social development. I'm sure you agree with me that there is no better time for both the policymakers as well as business leaders to discuss and emphasize the critical role of Internet and digital communication. As you're aware, countries in the past, or countries' competitiveness in the past, were measured by the availability and the quality of the physical infrastructure. And what I mean by physical infrastructure is the availability of roads, airports that enable the movement of people, as well as the availability of seaports that facilitate the movement of goods. However, today, in addition to the physical infrastructure, the digital infrastructure is as important and playing a great role in the competitiveness of any nations. Movement of data is as important as the movement of goods and people. And with all the challenge that the world is facing with the pandemic, it also helped us to review and evaluate the policies and the decision that has been taken during the last 2 decades. And it's obvious now that those nations and businesses that invested in building their digital infrastructure and enhancing their local and global connectivity and automating their services and goods by utilizing the latest technology managed to mitigate the impact of the pandemic and the lockdown. And here, I'm pleased to be part of Bahrain team, and I'm pleased with what we have done during the past 2 decades. I think the policy that we have taken and the strategy that we have adopted during the past two decades, we see the benefit of it today, starting by liberalizing the telecommunication sector in 2002, that has led to a significant increase in the investment in the digital infrastructure. Today, Bahrain has a ubiquitous fiber optic network. Our national broadband network covers all the islands. It reached 100% of all the businesses and more than 85% of the residential units. And also our policies stimulate the investment and balance between the competition and encouraging the company that's working in Bahrain to invest. And this is why we have been always among the first countries to deploy the latest technologies. Bahrain was the first country to deploy the 2G technologies, the 3G technologies. We have full 4G coverage technologies in Bahrain, and also we were among the first countries in the region and in the world to deploy the 5G technology. I think we are getting the benefits of that policies. It doesn't mean that we have achieved all our aspiration, even with the good number that we are having today, a penetration of more than 156% in broadband penetration. We have seen 7% growth in the subscriber of broadband from 2018 to 2019. We need to do still a lot to prepare ourselves for the new reality after the pandemic. And for that, we are enhancing our business environment, making sure that all the ecosystem is established, starting from the business environment, reviewing all regulatory framework by making sure that we have the right data protection laws and enforcing it, all the necessary cybersecurity regulation and enforcement, making sure that we continuously enhance and improve our digital infrastructure, as I said, which is the backbone of any development. Today, everybody is talking about the fourth industrial revolution and the digital transformation. We cannot achieve anything unless we have the right digital infrastructure. Of course, access to capital for our entrepreneurs in the ICT industries, ICT funds, making sure that we have the right incubator and facilitator and accelerator, to enable Bahraini entrepreneurs to flourish, as well as continuously working with our partners in the government, the EDB, to attract intelligent foreign direct investment, to make Bahrain the test bed for future for future product and services. We always encourage Bahrainis and non-Bahrainis entrepreneurs and investors to use Bahrain as a test bed for their product and services. We think this will help us and will help also our human resources. Again, human resources, we need to work and improve our what we are doing with the universities of Bahrain, with other universities and polytechnics in Bahrain, to make sure that we have graduates that have the right skills and knowledge to compete at a global business environment. Finally, I want to assure you that Bahrain will always support the Internet Society, the Bahrain chapter, as well as the global chapters. We know that it is important for humanity. It's important for the global economy and development. I wish you a fruitful discussion and thank you very much.
We'd like to express our gratitude and appreciation for the Minister for his informative and encouraging words. The Internet Society appreciate the support, and we're looking forward for future projects to work with the Ministry and His Excellency the Minister for positioning Bahrain as a leader in Internet services within the region. The next, after our keynote, we have after the Minister of Patron, our next speaker is our keynote speaker, and keynote speaker Jane Coffin. We like to welcome her. She's the Senior Vice President of Internet North at Internet Society. She comes with a wealth of knowledge in that area, and we are very much happy to have her with us, and I would like to welcome her. So, Ms. Jane, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, and please pass on my my appreciation to the Minister, His Excellency Engineer Kamal, for his speech. I had the pleasure of being in your country in 2004, many years ago, for an ITU development sector meeting where we were talking about how to negotiate for 3G. So this was many, many years ago, and your country has always been a leader in the region. I'd also just like to say, so that I don't miss anything, that all protocols are observed. And thank you all colleagues for the opportunity to address you today. I hope I'm not speaking too fast. Sometimes I get very excited about the work and I do speak too fast. What I'd like to do today is give you a very high level overview of some of the work that I'm working on with my teams. And so with Hannah, if you could show the slide presentation. And I would also just say for colleagues that obviously COVID has given us a bit of a wake-up call around the globe. It is keeping all of us very accountable for all of the work we have done in the past and work we need to continue into the future. As we find children and others who are not able to connect, and those countries that have been able to plan and connect their people for economic and social development, we couldn't ask for a stronger wake-up call for the importance of the internet. It truly has been a lifeline, and we are so proud at the Internet Society of the work our chapters do. So thank you to everyone in the Bahrain chapter. We're super appreciative. And also I want to recognize Nermeen Al-Sadani, a very good old friend who I've worked with for many, many years before coming to the Internet Society. She is the regional vice president for our Middle East region, and we are very happy to have her with us, as well as Hannah, who also helps with the chapter. So I just wanted to recognize them and thank the chapter for all the work you've been doing. We really are a global community, and staying online and having meetings like this is a way to keep us connected. I actually love being in person and seeing people. I get a lot of energy from seeing everyone who, whether they're building internet infrastructure, supporting the build out as a community, perhaps a network operator group like those of you that participate in MINAG, or those of you that may be looking at software programs or new applications to innovate. It's a pleasure to see so much development taking place. I've spent over 20 years plus working first to develop infrastructure and look at ways to help countries bring more telecom infrastructure many years ago. And now, of course, I transitioned to internet infrastructure and have had the pleasure of working with the teams at the Internet Society on the different development issues. So next slide, Hannah. So we have projects that are focused on both building the internet and promoting it, and we have projects focused on promoting and strengthening. I'm going to talk to you today about the projects that I help manage, and then some of the team members are here with you today to talk in more depth. I'll give a high-level overview. So the bigger internet, more of it, we call internet growth. Next slide. So as we've seen with COVID, excuse me, the global internet hasn't grown evenly around the world. It's been a bit uneven. And I think this is time for us to take a step back and look at what policies and regulations we can revisit. What infrastructure can we help build out now quickly? And what can we do to plan for more infrastructure? So we have two projects related to that, the Community Networks and Internet Exchange Point projects. And we also have a really important project on measuring the health of the internet. Matt Ford, who's one of the project leads, is on this call, and he knows a lot more about the project. I'm going to give a high-level overview, but this is that very important gathering of data from third parties to make sure we're looking at evidence-based policymaking and really showing people the importance of measuring the health of the infrastructure. Next slide. So the 8 projects being managed by me and my colleague Joe Hall. The first 3, if you go to the right on this wheel, and I think the wheel is very important, and Max Stucci, who's on this call as well, who's one of our project leads, sent this diagram to us for another presentation, and I have to admit that I've just adopted it, Max, because I like the circularity. It shows continuity, and it shows that there's some flow. So the top one, community networks, infrastructure, and community development, and measurements of the 3 projects that are in the internet growth portfolio, the building, the infrastructure, and the data. Next slide. And so just some pictorial representation for you. One of the slides you see here on community networks is a slide from a picture from Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, where we were so happy to be working with the government and the local community. And by working with the government didn't need a spectrum license. They said, go. No one's using the spectrum up in that area. It's a very high mountain area. So we go where there isn't connectivity. And some people ask, is it just to connect people? I said, it's to connect communities. So we're not counting the people, we're counting the networks on this project. In the middle, this is an actual picture from the Democratic Republic of Congo with colleagues from Facebook who do some support for the work that we're doing on building out IXPs in sub-Saharan Africa and around the world. And measuring, as you can see, measuring the internet, looking at the health of it, looking at case studies and use cases so that others can take that data and use it. Next slide. And this is just a quick overview. There are many people involved, and particularly a colleague, Kyle Schulman, who helps with coordination, and Leah Kiesling, who's very, very important to us, and another woman, Susanna Gray, for the work they do on the communication side. I forgot to put Susanna's name in here. And these are the project leads, and some of them are on the calls here with you today. Next slide. Community networks. These are bottom-up networks where we go in to make sure that the local community and the local authorities that we're following any rules that are there in place. And the team will talk to you more about this in a bit, but it's looking at connecting the unconnected and providing more affordable connectivity. We often like to say it's from the community, with the community, and by the community. The key ingredient here are people like you, the local champions, people that come together to help solve a problem. Right now, we have seen community networks around the world, from Greece to Georgia to New York City to rural parts of the United States that are not connected. and Argentina, where we have a fabulous project where they're actually providing connectivity to police and healthcare workers during this time of COVID, which has proven the importance of that network to the people in that community. And these are real slides of real people that we work with. We wanted to show you some of the humans, because the human networks are very important to building the networks. So next slide. And Max and Juan are the two people working closely on this project. And these are the 5 pillars that you'll see that we follow for this project. It's policy, looking at how to help increase and make policies better. Backhaul, very important to the technical aspects of moving traffic from point A to point B. The knowledge, building up the knowledge so that we're not the single point of failure on a project, but building that sustainable community of experts. The users, getting to the users to make sure that they are able to, have more affordable connectivity. And sustainability. This is all part of a cycle that works together. We try not to go anywhere without focusing on the sustainability aspect with our partners. Next slide. And I should say we do everything with partners. It's very important. These are just some pictorials of where we have some successful community networks from Europe to Asia Pacific, South America, Africa, and North America. And we work with communities that want us to be there. We don't go where we're not asked to be, because that wouldn't make any sense. We want to go where people are keen to see more connectivity and how we can help them and provide training, know-how, or just simply funding if they need to get started. And we know we can filter them in a way that makes sense from a new criteria perspective. Next slide. As a follow-on to those community networks, internet exchange points are those places at the layer 2 where we're exchanging traffic, and we're trying to build up local traffic exchange, peering, and interconnection in communities. So we have a team of people doing that. Next slide. Naveed Haq and Machuki Mwangi are the 2 leads on the project. And this is really about building that human capacity, building the communities to support that capacity at the internet exchange point, the network operator groups, so the research and education networks, the NRENs, building that infrastructure, building out those partnerships, and then looking at where we can engage globally, how we can impact policy and regulatory environments, and how we can better communicate with people around the planet. Next slide. This is just a quick picture of some of the places where we're doing work, and we take a regional approach and a global. So while we have experts around the world, because we believe in that local focus, but we tie this up with global when we're going into, say, an ITU meeting to advocate for more connectivity and more localized connectivity and internet traffic exchange at the local level. Next slide. How we work with partners in chapters. I wanted to make sure this was in the presentation because you're very important to the work we do. We do provide capacity building and training for chapters and community mobilization and policy outreach and engagement. So please feel free to reach out to any of the project leads at any time. And we'll make sure you have their emails through Nermeen and Hannah. Next slide. This is the Measuring the Internet project. It's a new project, and it's a really great project. And Matt Ford, who's on the call, and David Belson are the 2 people helping to lead that project with a team of others from inside the organization and outside with org members, with chapters and others. Next slide. So why would we be doing this? We want to bridge the gap between academic networking research and non-scientific audiences, journalists, policymakers, researchers. Standalone resources do exist, but they're not often focused on a specific aspect of internet infrastructure or driven by commercial interests. We want to be a trusted source of this information with respect to the internet, to make sure that there's good relevant data and interpretations that are easier to find, share, and reuse, and to help inform and support other Internet Society projects. So for example, we would be looking at working with other teams to make sure we put together use cases that are helpful to them and to help them do their work. So next slide. Again, we want to be able to provide a single location for multiple measures of internet evolution and health. And we're putting together an internet measurement dashboard with infographics. As Matt often likes to say, it's not a science project. We're here to tell stories with data, support non-scientific audiences so they understand the importance of that measurement data, and to provide context to the numbers in a timely, responsive, and interactive manner. Next slide.
Jane, before we go to the next slide, can we ask you just to raise your voice a little bit, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's really early here in the US, so sorry. I guess I'm speaking quietly because I think it's 4 a.m. So measuring the internet, how are we going to do this on the project? We're going to use case-driven information on internet shutdowns, enabling technologies, working with one of our projects called the Internet Way of Networking, some of the core principles that help build, that help explain why the internet's so important. Internet resiliency, there's a great project being worked on right now with this use case so that we can show and prove. Working with different partners around the world to get that data because we do not want to replicate and we're not going to try and do the work that others are doing. So we have agreements with and are working with some of these other partners. Working in the community, working with different organizations that have events going on, working with the research task force inside the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, looking at working with folks now online versus in person at different conferences and other events that we can either help put together or take part in. And we're going to, as we noted, or as I noted earlier, consume and process that third-party data by using existing measurements. So this is a great project that helps bring some of the work together in a more data-driven way and with the use cases that we can take to others so they can replicate that information. Next slide. And I think this is something that speaks to me, and I hope it speaks to all of you. There's no strategy that's going to succeed without the commitment of extraordinary people like all of you. So thank you for all the work that you're doing to build more infrastructure. This infrastructure is so important right now to all our economies and to development of humans everywhere. And so we thank you for all the work that you're doing. And that's just a high-level snapshot for you of some of the work we're doing on building and promoting more internet infrastructure. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane. That's a very informative presentation especially about the ISOC projects. We are very excited here in Bahrain to be part of it, and I'm sure all our members would be the same. I would also like to see you again in Bahrain. You've been here, we missed you maybe. Hopefully when you are next time in Bahrain, we'll be more than happy to meet with you and chat with you. You reminded me of something very important. With all the participants, you are more than welcome to join the Internet Society Bahrain Chapter. If you go to the Internet Society website, and you can request a membership, and then you can choose Bahrain Chapter and other chapters if you're interested. We are more than open to anybody from the globe to join the Bahrain Internet Society. And the next is the conclusion of the opening ceremony. I think we had a very good keynote speak. We don't have questions now. We'll have the questions at the end of the sessions. But really, I would like again to appreciate the participation of everybody who was effectively in the opening ceremony. We will move now to the moderator of session 1. Mr. Ali, am I right? Is it Ali? Mr. Ali Mishal, who is going to take the mic from now on. Good luck and thank you again.
Thank you, Ahmed, and thanks for Jane, and thanks for His Excellency for the introduction and the keynote speaker from Jane, and thanks for your handing over this to me. I have a great number of panelists, and their profile is amazing. They are coming from a diversified, different industry and different type of qualification and expertise. Our first session is about the community networks, and we mean by networks, those networks that are built, managed, and used by local communities. As we know that the internet is a part of the social, economic, and culture fabric for billions of people around the globe. It is how they connect, communicate, create, and collaborate. But while the internet revolution have come to the most of the world, there are places that have been missed. And into this, we are trying now to address some of these key issues and solutions, and looking forward for how we can tackle of that. So starting with, and after this speech, I will go through the panelists and to introduce them. But starting with right now, I will hand the floor to Juan Biarno, who is the Senior Policy Advisor into the Internet Society. He has focused on issues related to the internet infrastructure and access. His role as a subject matter expert, Juan has contributed to the development of the Internet Society's project on the internet growth, access, and sustainability. He is more into the very much active in Latin America, IGF, events and forums, being at regional or the international one that is happening every year once. So without further ado, I'm handing over back to Juan to start his presentation. Juan, floors are yours.
Thank you very much, Ali, for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here today. As you can see on my video, I will be changing my views between my notes and the camera, so please apologize for not being seeing directly to the camera at all times. But as well as Ali mentioned, I'm Senior Policy Advisor at the Internet Society. I'm originally from a small country in Latin America called Uruguay, but I'm currently located at the UK in a small city called Bristol. At the same time, from the beginning of this year, I've been co-lead for the Community Networks project that Jane just mentioned, alongside with my colleague Massimiliano Stucci. He's also in the call if you all want to make questions after the presentation. But let me share my screen so I can start with the presentation. I'm gonna also start my timer because I have limited time for this presentation. You also will see that many of the slides here are similar to the ones that Jane just presented, but we will try to go a little bit more into detail on some of them, so we can have a more in-depth discussion if we want to for different areas of this the community networks subject. Again, community networks are one of the key 8 projects at the Internet Society. We have been working with community networks for quite some time now. We inherited with Max this project that has been ongoing since 2016. So this is not something that started this year. It's something that it's an ongoing process that many of the people that work at the Internet Society and in many chapters had been working from quite some time, because community networks and the process behind community networks require it's not a sprint, it's a marathon in some cases, and we need to take into account a lot of topics and areas that they are not easy to change and they require some time. Jane also mentioned how we work. We work with a global and a regional approach, but also it's very important to highlight the local approach that we follow with this project. We have distributed expert staff from ISOC staff around the world working on this topic. And for us, it's not only for us, but for the project in general, and for all the partners that are working on the Community Networks project, it's very important to engage on a in global fora, for example, at the ITU, also at a regional level. We have engagements in different regions on a regional level. For example, in the case of the Middle East, it will be the Arab League for ICT Cabinet of Ministers, or the Arab Regulators Network. And also the local component and the local engagement with regulators and the local engagement with other partners in ground, it's very important. So we need to take into account that the different layers that the community networks projects in general have, it's a multi-layered engagement, and we need to take into account all of these layers to finally get to a successful deployment of the community network, of a community network. It's also, and I wanted to highlight, this is and this is for me, when we check at the map, the excellent position geographically that where the Middle East region is, because you have 3 regions adjacent to the Middle East, and those are Africa, Europe, and Asia. And in all of those regions, we have community networks. And when I say we, I mean the community of community networks have community networks deployed. And today we have 2 excellent and superb panelists, and I encourage you to follow their experience from Greece and from India specifically. So let's pay attention to them more than me in terms of their experience during the panel. Jane mentioned that community networks are an access solution. It's a complementary access solution. This is something also very important, because community networks in some cases want to provide connectivity to those that don't have it, and in a lot of cases is in those places where it also doesn't have commercial value to deploy a network for an internet service provider. So it's very important to see the partnering and the synchronizations that and the amalgamations that community networks can have with established internet service providers in any given region, not only in underserved areas, but in general. Jane mentioned very well the New York Mesh case. It's an urban community network in the middle of New York City, and you probably all know that it's not an unserved area in any means, but there is a need to have a community network there. So, and in this case, they work very well with partners and other ISPs in the ground. So it's very important to see community networks as a complementary access solution. And again, from the community, with the community, by the community. This is the layer that we were mentioning about the local and the community. It's very important to follow up and to make all those pillars that we are going to talk about in the next few minutes much stronger. So it's the involvement of the community. It's very important. And we mentioned the local champions. And when we talk about the local champions, sometimes people think about them as superhumans and people that are extremely intelligent in terms of technical aspect or policy aspects or regulation or different areas that community networks touches, but that's not the case. In general, local champions are just people that want to make a difference for their community. They want to make their community better, and they understand that through the internet connectivity, they are going to reach that better living standards, so to speak. And it's we have different examples of local champions that are not technical. For example, and Jane mentioned the case of in Georgia and Tusheti area. One of the local champions is actually a lawyer. It's a very very driven lawyer that wanted to bring connectivity to the mountain areas in Georgia, but he was not technical at the beginning, but he learned very fast and he tried to share that knowledge with others, and he became a leader for that community. We have, in other cases, in the case that in Argentina, we have one of the local champions, a nurse. You can see that nurses not necessarily need to be technical as well to know about routing or to know about Wi-Fi or to know about backhaul and connectivity, but these are people that are very driven to make their community better. And when I speak about the community and local champions, I always like to quote our CEO Andrew Sullivan, that he says that the internet is a deeply human technology. We need to always remember that the effects of internet go way beyond what that is only the connectivity itself, and be able to have Facebook or being able to have to stream a video. It's the impact and the how we process and how we implement the internet and the internet infrastructure. It depends highly on the human component. So this is very important to have into account when we talk about local communities, when we talk about local champions. And this is a little bit of a sneak peek of how we work at the Internet Society specifically. This is not general for other partners that work with community networks, but in our case, in our specific case, at the Internet Society, we have 4 main stages of how we work with the community to make deployments of community networks. And again, we like this this notion of circularity and that everything is connected, because it is actually how it is. And as I said, the process of deploying a community network sometimes takes more than 1 year, and even more than 2. So we need to make sure that we are following this continuously, this deployment and this engagement and all the pillars that we need to follow to actually be able to deploy a community network. But basically, one of our first stages involves engagement. Engagement, it's basically the way that we, the Internet Society, know about a community that wants to connect to the internet and wants to implement a community network. Many of this engagement happens on another project at the Internet Society that Jane mentioned, and it's part of the growth portfolio. That's the Infrastructure and Community Development Project, InfraComDev for short. And they play a key role for us as the community network project, because they are on the ground organizing engagement with the community. And in those engagements and in those instances where people get together, they get to know each other, and also they get to know the opportunities that they have. And in this case, they know through this community that they can actually, that the community network is actually a viable complementary access solution for them. So we either connect with them directly, the project, the Infracom Dev project connects with us, and we get together to bring that community or that local champion and help with his idea of connecting their community. We also do it knowing from someone else. My colleague Max, he always likes to say that he's Italian, so he always jokes about that he has a cousin that knows someone that needs community networks, and sometimes it's like that. We know from someone else that needs that connectivity, that we can help them deploy a community network. The next stage is policy. There, I'm going to go into more detail later, but it's one of our key stages for us. As we said, we are working in different levels, global, regional, and local, to be able to bring the policy that allows community networks to thrive. We also mentioned the training, and this is, again, part of it. Goes back to that notion that you don't have to be extremely technical to be a local champion or to be championing for your community, but you need that knowledge to later implement and sustain that community. So training and knowledge is also a key stage for us at the Internet Society to help our partners deploy community networks. And finally, it looks like to be the end, but the deployment itself, it brings again back to the circle of engagement and policy and training, because once a community is deployed, what generally happens is that it starts to grow, and it needs more resources and more people and more training, and they need more public resources such as spectrum, for example, or more capacity on a fiber for a backhaul. So that brings again this circle of engagement and review policies, that policies are in place, if they're allow for community networks to thrive or to grow or to be sustainable. So this is why we have this notion of circularity when we engage on the projects. And again, this is how we approach it from the Internet Society, and not necessarily how other partners approach it, but we thought it will be important to connect this, our approach, since this is a chapter event, and because chapters are a key part of this engagement and these stages in the deployment. I'm a little bit over time, so I'm going to go a little bit faster here. But again, Jane mentioned the pillars of community. As we have policy, it's very important that we know the policies that are in place on a local level, to know what we need to change, if is there something that we need to change, licenses, spectrum allocations, access to backhaul and to fiber. And this brings us to the next pillar. We need to have backhaul and the access to backhaul, because it's very important that we connect the community networks to the greater internet, because that is what brings the actual value to the community network at the end of the day. Again, we talk about the training and the knowledge, the local knowledge. We need to make sure that the local community is prepared to maintain, to deploy, and to sustain that community network. The community, again, it's vital. It's on the name of this deployment community. It's one of the key aspects. And then we have the sustainability. I'm sure that the panelists will discuss about this, and they are going to show you how a community network can be sustainable. And this is a key aspect, because once it is deployed, it's not just one deployment. It needs to go further and further to keep growing and keep connecting people.
I think, Juan, maybe for the sake of times, maybe the rest we can take it during the panel discussions, if that is
Absolutely
fine with you. Yeah.
Yes,
Great.
I have 2 more slides that are related to challenges and opportunities, and we can definitely take those during the panel discussion.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Juan. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm sure more to come in our discussions. And just going forward, I would like to introduce the rest of my panelists, and then we take it as a discussions and interactive discussions as well. So let me introduce Dr. Ali Al-Soufi. He is Associate Professor, Dean of ICT College and British University of Bahrain. Dr. Ali have a great participation in a number of events and ICT forums, plus being on board on number of committees and others like IGA and other Arab universities. So to go through his profile, it's so rich, so it will take time to finish all of it. Again, I would introduce our colleague, Vesalis Kyrisos. He is a production engineer and management and quality control with a master's degree. He has rich experience in project management and community building. For the past 5 years, he has been working on free open source. We have Dr. Mohammed Baqir, Dean, College of Applied Studies, University of Bahrain. Dr. Mohammed is currently the Dean of the College of Applied Studies and Acting Director of Quality Assurance Accreditation Center at University of Bahrain, as well as faculty member of the Department of Computer Engineering, College of Information Technology. Dr. Mohammed have a lot of participations and membership in different organizations, and he's so much active as well in the events of the technology and related to the internet. And finally, we have Ms. Rita, has over 14 years of rich experience or professional experience in ICT development and managing programs and projects at different stake levels of competency. So with a great panelist and rich of expertise and qualifications and others within the internet industry, we will begin. And of course, Juan is part of our discussions here. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested to highlight any points before I drop any questions, or if you want to open a subject that you are want to discussions to be in, floors are yours. Maybe Dr. Ali want to comment on the connectivity network, starting with.
Thank you, Ali. Is the floor is mine now?
Yes, it's yours, Doctor, and I want to see your review about the community networks and how do you see like this as an opportunity within the internet, and how to connect and connected area and people to the internet societies, to the internet and the platform as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. Thank you, and good morning, everybody. And I think I will add to my previous colleagues who mentioned various important points. I think I'll start with COVID. I think COVID was not a wake-up call. I think it was electric shock, especially in our area, which education sector. And it was bad news for some and good news for some. Obviously, good news for us as in education, because we were pushing this concept or online or e-learning many years, but the response was not very good in various education communities. So this was a very good opportunity that woke up everybody and with electric shock, and everybody started picking up and then speeding up. The coverage, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities we found other than this in various communities. In public sector, which I work with, and with e-government, I think over the last 15 years, there are hundreds of e-services being developed. And now the community, now we have very much a community that really engaged with this e-services, where in the past it was something scary. For entrepreneurs, it opened up a lot of opportunities as well. I mean, I will just focus on again in education. In our graduate, which I'm proudly saying that's a lot of entrepreneurs came out of ICT college, and I can even name some of them who really developed small businesses and started working things like Mala'ib, which is the booking the sport halls, e-tutoring, how to book personal tutors, and lastly, maybe recently the one called Scratch to sell your unwanted equipment and things that you don't want at home, and you can even resell it. Of course, in household there are businesses and social media. and very much in collaboration between groups. I thought this is one of the good opportunities which we found in between friends, families, workmates, classmates, even mothers, and this activity just goes on. There are a lot of huge opportunity we have achieved, and also opportunity for future, which I think there is no limit as far as your imagination. I think I stop here.
Yep. Thanks, Doctor. Thanks, Doctor. Visalis, how do you see that as an opportunity? Because I'm moving from an educational sector to your area of project management. How do you see that? And if you have any examples of that?
Hello, it's good to be among you, and I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity to be in your event, and also ISOC for inviting me. So I'm here under my capacity as a member and administrator of a community network in rural Greece. And this is a community network that serves 11 villages, which did not used to have any internet connectivity at all. What we did is we worked with the local community to build this infrastructure that not only provides connectivity to internet, but also provides as an infrastructure, it can support and forgive the noise, it can support and host also local services that are useful for the local community. So what we have seen during this past few months of the pandemic lockdown in Greece, we realized that our infrastructure has helped people get online and keep contact with their family and friends who are not in the villages. But not only that, we also had people who were not originally living in the villages, but they were from the capital, from example, Athens, and they were isolated. They were locked down into the villages, and they had to work. So what they did is that they used our infrastructure to get online and do some remote working, and that actually showed us that there is an opportunity now for rural areas to be revitalized, for people to be able to go back to a nicer environment and be able to work and live there, enjoy the environment, but also do remote working. And this is something that didn't used to be so widespread earlier, but now with the pandemic, I think that one thing that is highlighted is that we can do remote working, and we can, let's say, disengage from the locality. So we have seen that happening with our villages, people coming back to the village, staying there, working from there, and of course offering some development opportunities for the local area.
Thank you, Visalis. Dr. Muhammad, how do you see that the pandemic impact, is it positive or negative when it comes to the connectivity for the usage and the advanced usage of, especially when it comes to the education for students within universities, within schools? Was it a surprise and the technology helped us, or we were not ready when it comes to on a region level, or even within your expertise, if it is Bahrain or outside that?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali, for this question. I think, as Dr. Ali Sufi said, it's actually an electric shock to kind of rapidly accelerate the implementation of our e-learning systems, extending it to all of our staff and faculty, making sure that all of our, let's say, students can access the classrooms. We had to take into consideration sometimes that we need to kind of lower the, let's say, the standard of, let's say, availability of, let's say, platforms, because not all, let's say, students may have, let's say, laptops or high-speed internet to get, let's say, videos on their phones. So we kind of take into consideration some kind of mechanisms to make the classes available to everyone. Another aspect also with all this remote kind of work that's happening in Bahrain, we also had a challenge of making our staff working from home and quickly adapting all the paper kind of processes that we had previously into electronic kind of process, and making everyone accept the digital signatures, accept that the processes need to kind of not go through the, let's say, the old kind of hierarchical kind of approval, paperwork, office to office kind of processes. So we did a lot of changes in this perspective as well. In addition to, we had to buy a lot of kind of laptops to our remote working staff and faculty. Some of them were based in the university. However, of course, as you know, in all teaching kind of, say, environment, you have some aspect that you cannot transfer into the internet and make everyone kind of learn on the internet. For example, the labs, we still had the challenge that we need to kind of provide the students with the hands-on experience of sitting in a lab, doing the experiment, handling the material. This was not, of course, transferred immediately, but we have some ideas to kind of provide the students with this opportunity in the future. For example, providing them with a lab kit that we can send to them and they can do some experiments at home. But of course, it will be, it has some costs associated to it. Would it be accepted that this is achieving the learning outcomes or not? This is another issue that we have to kind of focus on.
True, Doctor. I mean, this pandemic have experienced us a lot of things that we haven't seen or thought about before, but being a human and the nature of the human have forced us to create and innovate different ways to do things rather than going on the normal way of doing it. I move now to Ms. Ruta, and from your area of expertise, how do you see that the connectivity and whether there is an opportunity, especially you are coming from a research industry and more into the IT in specific. So if you enlighten us with your feedback and input about this.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, ISOC, for inviting me.
We cannot hear you clearly.
Am I audible now? Hello?
Not clear. You are muted now. If you unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello?
Yes, now it's good.
Yeah. First, I would like to thank you, ISOC, for inviting me, and I'm honored to be part of this event. As you mentioned, I have been working with community networks in India from the last 10 years, more than 10 years, and with 3 community networks, precisely to be with 3 community networks in India. To one of the community networks where I have worked, where ISOC was one of the major funder for us, and we established about more than 100 networks in India, across India. Also, that if I tell you about India as a demographic country, most 70% of the population in India still lives in a rural side of the country, where where mobile penetration is increasing. However, the reliable and affordable internet is yet distant dream for many rural regions of the country. There are about more than 20 or 20, more than about 100 villages which do not have any kind of a telecom or any kind of a telecom provision in India, which is like they are telecom dark zone areas. Not even mobile network, not even 2G mobile network is there actually. So understanding the need of a community networks is yes, in India perspective, is very much required. And ISOC has been very helpful to set up a community networks in India. There are about 4 to 5 community networks in India, which are operational across the country. Some of the networks are based in Delhi. One of the network which is known as a Geomesh Informatics, which is based in Madurai. Air Jaldi is another started as a community network. There they later on they became ISP, and they are working in Dharamshala and also providing different sort of a connectivity services across the country. Now they have also become a class national level internet service provider. Uh, Similarly, there is a offline and online model of a community networks, which is established by organization called Janastu, which works both on a model of offline as well as online. So even if my when my fellow colleague were talking about the issue of a backhaul, that presentable which we do understand, and we try to solve the issue by making a local network and to create the model in a offline and online format. uh, uh, One of the things that one of the things that I would like to talk about in the community networks in a times of COVID, it's when the reliable and affordable internet is really need for that. It's really we though India has a 5 to 7 community networks, but definitely we need a more community networks to be deployed by the community and also to be owned by the community, which is a present time scenario. Uh, Not only for doing online classes, but also for a telehealth services or to do a work from home. uh, you may have heard about that thousands of migrant workers are going back to their home. The problem reside there itself, that when thousands of migrant workers are coming back, or the professionals are coming back to their home in this pandemic. It's really required that we do have a reliable internet. uh,
Mhm.
The scenario right now in India is in that scenario. uh, we we can easily say that we do have a internet connectivity, but if we say that what kind of a status we have, we can still easily say that only 10% or maximum 20% of a rural population has proper broadband connectivity in the rural regions of the country. So the emergence of a community networks and own of a community networks is really required.
True, true.
uh,
I think, Ms. Ruta, I mean, you have showed good examples of the community network usage and use cases that you are having within India. Let me get back to you after this
Sure.
round of questions. I will move now to Mr. Juan. We have disconnect you from your presentation. So if you just go with us through the remaining slides and let us know, I mean, the continuation of the presentation, because you were having a very critical points to cover through that. If you share with us your part.
Yes, thank you very much. I will do it really quick, and it's not problem at all. It was my my issue. I overstepped with time, and but basically I wanted to show the attendees and distinguished colleagues here these two final slides that I think reflect some of the questions that you have been mentioning to the rest of the panelists about the challenges and also the opportunities that these complementary access solutions are bringing due to COVID, because COVID has shown that internet is a lifeline for everyone. I mean, we are here over 110 people that are connected. Imagine that for each one of us, there's one person that is not connected. Half of the population of the world is not connected at all. And this is when you see that maybe the person right next to you doesn't have internet connectivity in this time, you cannot believe how they can move forward with the life without any connectivity at all. It's something that I think it's very important to try to reflect upon this COVID situation. And we mentioned specifically for community networks and other access solutions, we have um, challenges in local engagement, how we engage, how we train. We have a lot of policy issues and challenges. And I think these are the ones, and our panelists mentioned this. This is a great opportunity. COVID gives us. I will like to use that word electroshock to the opportunities and to the need of change that we have in certain areas. And policy is one of them. We need to make sure that we have light licenses, frameworks that help people in small areas to connect. We need to have other ways to allocate spectrum. We need to use universal service funds and other funding mechanisms differently, so we can bring cost, we can provide other power sources and cash flow. Yes.
Good, Mr. Juan. Again, because we are limited of time, and
yes,
I need to have some input and feedback from the panelists as well on some other aspects within the community network. So if Dr. Ali allow me, I'm going back to him on how can internet strengthen the community? How do you see that the internet can strengthen this community in your own view?
Yeah, thank you. I think the internet really has a major role in holding together the community. There are different aspects. I will end up with the education side. However, before that, we have the social media plays a major role, especially with the elderly and retired, and these are themselves are a community. In the past, they were isolated. Now they're back and connected with their friends while at home. Another example, as I said earlier, collaboration between groups and friends, families, and work, even a project even between us and lecturers and our students. We collaborate, communicate, and connect for various education aspects. Gaming is another area of gaming is a community by itself. Kids and even elderly people, they do it's a community, and also is a kind of like playing games in a group method. The other side, the other area which I found very also active is the NGOs and societies are now much more connected. Take one example. You can have different NGOs, society, political, professional. Charity is recently I found is very active in the community after with the connectivity. In the past, it was difficult to participate in these charity communities, but now it's much easier with the connectivity. This can go on. This itself can be a subject by itself. But finally, the schools and parents. I found during this, Dr. Muhammad, you're doing something. I found that with this COVID experience, schools and online or online lecturing with the kids sitting at home, the parents became more active. I mean, all the historically always the schools or education sector complain about that the parents do not engage with the schools. Okay, they throw all their kids a problem to us in the schools. They think we can manage their kids, but they are not engaged. Now, after this online, I found that so many parents sitting at home watching their kids, making sure they attend the class, making sure okay, sometimes also help them in some of the assignments, also, but in general, really, that made them more engaged. And this is one of the things we need to think in future, how we bring up the levels of the parents, some of the parents which are not really much educated, to the level that they can also be positive in positive role in it.
True, Doctor, true. I mean, on top of that, maybe I'm taking my question to Dr. Muhammad. I personally, before, I was always saying that the social media have connected the unconnected people outside your area and region and the community, while you are disconnected from your community, your family, your friends. But now with the pandemics and what happens, in my personal view, I found that the opposite happened now. This is on adding to Dr. Ali. So what do you think, Dr. Muhammad? You are muted, Doctor.
Yes. I think I agree, Dr. Ali, about what you said about the connectivity and the social media providing us with information. These days, you will see everyone going online and seek information from official channels or from unofficial channels, from subscribing to local and international, let's say, information sources. But if you take this pandemic issue into consideration, you'll see that that we have a lot of, let's say, patient or people under, let's say, quarantine that, that they want to seek information about their condition, or they want to tell their, let's say, families about what's happening to them, and they will post information. So having a community, a network of community or community network, it's very important, not in, let's say, remote areas or geographically big countries. It's even applicable to Bahrain as well. And social media played a big role in these days into finding information. Maybe not the cure for corona, but prevention, the acceleration of corona in the country. How can I improve my health and safety, and so on.
Yep. Thanks, Doctor. Visalis, I would say, what do you think are the limitation of the internet in building the community network? What are those limitations, in your opinion? Visalis?
Yep.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Excuse me. Okay, so I think that community networks face a difficulty when it comes to the regulatory and legal framework, and this is something that needs to be addressed. And also when it comes to the cost of backhaul. Usually this is really high because the whole, let's say, industry was made for the big players, for big companies, and not for small community networks such as ours. So this is an environment that it's, I would say it's impossible for community networks to survive. Thus, it needs to be modified, it needs to be amended so that community networks are also facilitated and helped to grow and blossom. And it is really important that you have community networks, not only in the cities, but perhaps more especially in the remote areas where there is no connectivity at all, where there is no, let's say, profit motivation for the big companies. And one other aspect I would like to stress is the community aspect. So it's not only about getting online, but it is also about meaningfully getting online. And this requires training and education, and also it requires active engagement. So what we are doing with our community is that we are transforming the, let's say, consumers to active participants. And in doing so, we are strengthening the community bonds. We are building a neighborhood. And this is really, really important, especially in times of COVID-19, where you see that there is a barrier in people getting together and in people socializing. That means that with whomever is in your vicinity, you need to find ways to build a communication. You have to be close with each other. And this is what we also achieve by building the community in our community network.
Thank you, Visalis. We are running out of time, and the second session about to start. So I'll have my last question to Ms. Ruta, and if you enlighten us, because you have been into this and you have seen it and you have built this community network. So what do you think is the limitations that you have faced, and if you have any solution suggestion in mind?
Definitely. So as my fellow colleague mentioned about that active participation in within rural part active participation is something really is really required. And that is one of the reasons that when we start the community network, we need to understand the need of the community, why they really want the community network, why do they really want the network, what is the purpose of using the network, and how they can sustain it. So the sustainability portion of the network has to come from the concept, from the idea of starting the network itself. It cannot be held for a once you have started and then you are uh, thinking of a sustainability. The business model or the sustainability portion of the network, definitely it has to come on the side of a beginning of the network. Second, as regulatory and licensing processes in India is a cumbersome process. That's something which has to be dealt with it with when you are while working in a network. There are several models in India. There are also the models where small networks are also playing as a franchisee based models, but there are also the one entrepreneur who has set up a network and providing a Wi-Fi services. Also, there's a model where mobile van with Wi-Fi is going across the rural side and providing the internet connectivity. So there are different sort of a models which has been plug in plug play model have been uh, experimented in India, and also there are some of the models which are successful also in India. One of the thing that we have found successful in India is a hub and spoke model, where we have established the big network there and connected the small villages with that network, creating a local network within the hub and spoke. So even if there's no backhaul, if our main telecom provider is shut down, that one of the things which we have faced number of times when our main backhaul provider is not providing the internet, but
Exactly.
still the community is connected through the local network. And the use of a network which we have seen from a different sectors as well, not only for the education, health, but also that where India, where handicraft is a very much popular, people are selling their people also want to sell their products online, and also the local, whether the internet, whether backhaul is working or not, but though still community is connected and able to sell their products through local network. So we have
True, Ms.
seen all those
Ruta. Yeah.
cases.
It is a very much interesting discussions, and we have so much to add and contribute to, but we are always binded with the time, and always the time cut off such interesting discussions. I would like to thank all the panelists for their great input and contribution to the discussions here. And I have seen a note in the chat which I liked, and I would like just to read it for all before I close this session. The gentleman Salah Hussein or Hassani says, in fact, the future has just started. Thanks to Corona, business and education and everything will change. And I think to a certain extent, this is true, because as we mentioned in the beginning, that we said, being a human being, we always try to innovate and create when we are put in a corner, so we have to find a solution. Thank you all. Thanks for your contributions, and see you later. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
all.
to all our
Thank you.
speakers, and thank you, Mr. Ali, for moderating the first session. By the way, to all of the people who doesn't know Mr. Ali Mashal, he is the Internet Society Bahrain Chapter Vice President, as well as a payment industry expert with 25 years of experience in payment system, digital transformation, and in fintech. Thank you so much, Mr. Ali.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Moving forward to our agenda today, we'll be having our next session, fostering infrastructure and technical communities. Moderating the session would be the CEO of Etisalat Bahrain and the Internet Society Bahrain Chapter Secretary, Mr. Rashid Al-Sanan. Mr. Rashid?
Yes, thank you, Jane. Thank you, the Internet Society and BTEC for this beautiful event, and to see many participants and many active participants in this. Now, the second session of this event is about fostering infrastructure and technical communities. You know, the Bahrain has realized really the importance of the infrastructure, the role of the infrastructure to provide services to all companies, individuals. It's very important, you know, the infrastructure. So in 2019, Bahrain managed to separate infrastructure from services by creating an entity called BNet, which takes care of the whole infrastructure, leaving service provider ISPs to compete to provide products and services to the end users. Of course, that means that the infrastructure is now taken care by itself in terms of development, all of this. There's no need, because as you know, competition makes lower prices, and lower prices makes development a bit hard in this. So now the infrastructure is taking its toll in terms of developing itself. But now with this role, how the infrastructure, our infrastructure in Bahrain, coped with this pandemic that we are in, COVID-19. Now, to kick off this second session, I would let me introduce Mr. Naveed Al-Haq. Naveed, of course, he is the Asia Pacific Regional Director for Infrastructure and Connectivity, leading technical policy and advocacy work in internet access, infrastructure and community development domains. He has 17 years experience in the ICT business, as before joining the Internet Society, he was working with Pakistan Telecommunication Authority, PTA, which is the government of Pakistan, as an Assistant Director, Information and Communication Technologies, ICT. He is an alumni member of ICANN's Fellowship, Internet Society Next Generation Leadership and Diplo Foundation's Internet Governance Capacity Building Program. And he lives in Pakistan, Islamabad. Now his subject, he'll be talking about strong communities build resilient infrastructure. Over to you, Naveed, and I'll take it over to introduce the panelists for this session after this. So you have 15 minutes, please, Naveed. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Rashid Al-Sanan, and hello, good morning, afternoon. Assalamu alaikum to the friends in Bahrain and Middle East. Thank you for joining us. I will be talking in next 10 to 15 minutes about how strong communities build a resilient infrastructure. I'm sure you're able to see my screen. Okay. So what we believe in the Internet Society is that when people come together and work in the Internet way, and as we know, Internet is networks of networks. So, you know, those networks come together to make a whole Internet. And it's very important that those networks trust each other, they work together. If they are not able to do, then the Internet is broken. Similarly, when people come together and work in the Internet way, great things can happen. And I'm gonna shed some light and some thoughts on the infrastructure bit, on how communities, strong communities, can help to build a better infrastructure, which in current pandemic has got a lot of attention and need as well when internet is becoming a lifeline. So if we try to see the internet infrastructure, we can divide the infrastructure bit into two parts. So you can see on the left side, there's access infrastructure and the content infrastructure. The access infrastructure is primarily those fiber optic cables, those mobile towers, those, well, in some countries, we still have copper cables. So all of those cables, those technologies that provide access either to your mobile phone or to your laptop or to your computer are part of the access infrastructure. The access infrastructure enables content infrastructure, because if you don't have content, the access infrastructure would perhaps won't have that much of importance. You need the content, the websites, the services, the WhatsApp, the Facebook, the Google, Wikipedia, all sort, and the local content that I'm sure that you will be using in Bahrain. So you use that content, and the content compromises of the hosting services, the servers. Again, those servers are various types of servers, web servers, etc., etc. But then the access infrastructure leads to the content infrastructure, and they both, in today's world, are pretty much interlinked. They're pretty much dependent as well. Without each other, they cannot build a stronger or a proper infrastructure in a country. I'll not go into the right side, which is digital hub and digital transformer, because eventually it's the infrastructure that leads to a digital economy. If you have a stronger infrastructure in your country, you have more chances to have a more digitally enabled environment, which means a digital enabled society. So again, I said, I'll not talk about digital hub and digital transformer, but what I'm trying to say is that infrastructure leads to the digital transformation in society. We recently had a very good study led by Nermeen, who's our head for the Middle East, the Internet Society. And I've just pasted the link here. Please, if you are interested to know more about the status of internet infrastructure in Middle East and North Africa, it's a fabulous report to know what is the current status of various countries. So I invite you to please go to this link and read the report to know more about the infrastructure bit. Now, let's come to the communities. Which are those communities who, if are stronger, can build a more resilient, a powerful infrastructure? The first one is the network operator groups. These, as the name says, these are the groups of network operators, those companies who provide you the network services or the infrastructure services. They could be, of course, a mobile company. They could be a fixed line company. They can even be those network engineers or other technical professionals who are involved in infrastructure discussions. So primarily, network operator groups are informal forums which bring all those various technical communities under one forum to discuss matters which are related to routing, network security, peering, interconnection, and other operational internet issues. These communities are very vibrant and very important as well in order to promote a stronger infrastructure in a country environment. They contribute primarily through local technical capacity. So this picture that you can see on my screen is from MENOG, which is the Middle East Network Operator Group. This is a group that serves primarily as a network operator group for the Middle East region. These meetings have a lot of technical hands-on workshops, also some technical discussions, which eventually helps to build the technical capacity. Because in order for the internet to run, at the end of the day, you need those resilient technical engineers or those people who can take care of the infrastructure bit. So these forums, like one of those is MENOG for Middle East, help to build that or nourish those individuals who can then take a bit further in making the infrastructure possible. The second contribution that they do towards infrastructure is the platform for community collaboration. As I was saying, these forums invite various network operator groups, individuals, technical professionals to come and discuss what is going on in the internet space. Now, these discussions, for example, could be about IP version 6. These discussions could be about enhancing the routing security, which is, of course, an important aspect of overall cybersecurity, and how to make internet more resilient and more better and faster. So this community, the network operator group, is an important one. The second community that I want to share with you are the national research and education networks. These are also organizations, kind of internet service providers, because their primary mandate is to provide internet services to the education and research communities. There are a lot of enrins country level, some are on the regional level. So this picture that you see is from ESREN, which is the Arab State Research and Education Network. Again, a vibrant community that discusses how they can support the needs and requirements of research and educational institutes or communities within the Arab states. Their primary contribution, of course, is research and education. I don't know if you would have heard about Internet 2. It's one of their major work that is going on. You can Google Internet 2 and it will take you to the website, which shows how NRENs are discussing on better research, again, to make a better infrastructure. Most of the discussions that are happening under Internet 2 are related to, sorry for that, are related to telemedicine and also how to improve the network efficiency. The third, and I would say a very important community, is the internet exchange points. This picture shows you the current status of internet exchange points, which is available on Internet Exchange Map in Middle East. So what is an IXP? In a simple word, they are public peering facility, which is a physical location that offers traffic exchange services to IP networks. IP networks, any network that runs over IP, primarily any network that runs on the internet, which could be your ISP, it could be a content delivery network. But if I want to tell it more on a common man language, I'll put an analogy of an airport. So for example, you have airline in Manama city in Bahrain. And then there is another airline working in Rifa city in Bahrain. Both of these airlines take their passengers to Jeddah airport. And if someone wants to travel from Manama to Rifa, they have to take this flight to Manama Air, go to Jeddah, change the flight, sit on the plane of Rifa airline and come to Rifa. Now imagine if that was a case in reality, how much extra cost and time you as a passenger or a consumer would be paying. Because first you have to take a long flight, which is an international flight to Jeddah, and then take another flight coming back to Rifa. Imagine if there is a third city, say Issa Town in Bahrain, and there comes an airport in Issa Town, which says to Manama Air and also to Rifa Air that you can come to my airport and you can exchange your passengers. If that happens, both the time and the cost of the consumer and also of the airline would drastically decrease, which brings more efficiency and more better service. Similarly, internet exchange points are like those airports, which keep your local internet traffic within your country. They contribute towards better, faster, and more affordable internet to the people. Because every bit that goes out of the network on the internet has a cost associated with it. So if the time to reach that packet or that content is reduced, there is a lot of economical benefit behind it. The IXPs also help in terms of bringing the content near to the consumer. So for me, as an internet user, it's important that the content I'm trying to access is near to me. The farther the content or the far the content is, the more time it will take, and again, the more cost it will involve. So IXPs bring those content delivery networks. It's also a primary function of an IXP, or I would say they create an enabling environment where big content providers can actually host their services within the IXP location. So if you have an IX in Manama, you might be able to access Netflix. Why Netflix? In fact, the local Bahraini services from that IXP, which will help you and give you a better experience as a user. They also, of course, increase the infrastructure resiliency. Imagine a situation of disaster where your international internet links are disconnected. And if you don't have an IXP in your country, you would be totally dependent. In fact, you will not be able to access anything. However, imagining the same case, even if the international internet connectivity is not functioning due to disaster or any other reason, you would still be able to access the local content and services, and in fact, the international services which are hosted in your IXP without any problem. So that's another important function of IXPs. The third is supporting the local internet during COVID-19. We have seen in countries where there are good and strong IXPs, the network traffic increase haven't affected much to the users. They're still able to have the same quality of service and experience. You can find more details from this in the insights of speed test. So they have an insight tool, and you can see those countries. If you compare those countries with IXP, you will see the speed rate for the mobile networks or even for the fixed line network have been pretty stable or better. Another important function that IXPs are doing during COVID-19 is that they're offering a place where work from home can become very efficient. So for example, if there is a bank in Bahrain and the employees of the bank want to have all the services done through online, or even if there are government services which the citizens are using online, if those services do have a support or they are hosted at the IXP, that will enable a more better environment for the current pandemic, where you would be very easily using the work from home for any kind of local services that you actually need in a normal environment. So that's the third important community. Now, how we as an internet society work with these communities. We work with them to improve capacity building. We run trainings, workshops with these communities to, of course, produce the next generation leaders, the technical leaders. We also help and work with them for community building. It's very important, as I've been saying in my talk so far. Resilient communities, stronger communities are important for a better internet infrastructure. We also support and help them on infrastructure development, primarily with the IXPs, where we provide them hardwares, which is routers, switches, or even the servers that they need for a better and functional IXP. We also have partnerships with various other similar organizations and even the IXP community and the NOC communities, where we can see how we can support them more to build a stronger and open internet for the world. And last but not least, we have a global engagement program under our project, where we look for a global partnership across the globe with, again, various regional organizations. And eventually the cause is same, the purpose is same, that how we can have a more better and resilient internet for the world. The last slide, I'm just gonna talk about how, since it's an Internet Bahrain chapter, and I'm sure there would be some people who are already part of our chapters, how, if you have a question that how the chapters can work with our project in Internet Society, you can of course help us with the capacity building. Recently, we've been running a course for South Asian countries, where some of the chapters are involved to run an online course, and that online course is on network operation. So it's a technical course, but still there's a partnership with the chapter where they are helping us to run this course online. You can help us with community building, mobilize the local community to set up a local NOG in case there is an interest or an internet exchange point. And then, of course, you can also work with us in policy engagement outreach. The current pandemic has opened the eyes of policymakers and regulators, and they have realized that there is still a lot to be done to make internet more useful and something which is available for the people. The previous session, you heard from my colleagues about community networks, where how the networks are operated and managed by the community to connect to themselves. In this project, we work with policymakers and regulators to see how they can have more enabling environment that enables IXPs, that enables technical communities, and that gives them a space to make internet more better in their countries. With this, I'll say thank you so much, shukran, and stop sharing my screen, and back to you, Rashid Al-Asnan.
Thank you, Naveed. This is a very informative speech. Of course, Naveed will also be continuing with us as a panelist. So now over to the panel discussion. The first, let me introduce Mr. Hani Askar. Hani, he's working as a Director of Products and Solution and Capacity Management Global Products and Services in Batilco, a Bahrain telecommunications company. So he's the director for this global and products solution and capacity management. And he's focusing mainly on contributing to international establishment of content and cloud providers in order to achieve their growth and expansion strategies in Bahrain and also in the Middle East. Askar is in charge of this global products and capacity management unit, which is responsible to achieve Batilco's vision, which is being the leading digital solution provider by developing and managing partnership, cross-border terrestrial and submarine cables, data centers, IPs, Manama Internet Exchange, and global Ethernet products. He has 15 years experience in the telecom, and he has got, of course, BEng from the University of Lancaster, and in computing and communication system engineering from Manchester University. Now, he's because I mentioned Manama Exchange, and Manama Exchange is the latest IXP in Bahrain, introduced in 2019, and providing internet peering and local content from various providers like Amazon, Google in the way, Microsoft. So it is earlier in Bahrain, there is one Bahrain Internet Exchange that was introduced very, very early during 2004, maybe, and 5. Unfortunately, the Bahrain Internet Exchange has got only a very limited role currently, maybe handling the peering for the government services. And the rest of the ISPs, most of them, they are peering outside of the country. So we are taking through the IP transit or international links to get our peering. Now there is Manama Exchange, and currently there are some ISPs that have been connected through this, and of course waiting for the other ISPs so to complete the peering in Bahrain. Now coming to Hani, of course we have others with us on the panel. We have also Rashid Mohammed, Mr. Rashid Mohammed, and also we have Hisham Brahim from RIPE NCC. I will introduce them as I come along to them. However, let's start with Hani, and Hani being in charge of the IXP in Batilco. What measures operators should address during the pandemic situation?
Well, thank you for inviting me into this society. I'm actually honored to be in here. Well, as a first step, the pandemic has, I would say, changed the behavior of even internet usage. where contribution to the community is something mandatory by every single organization. And the major measures taken during this pandemic is having a reliable network. Definitely a reliable network. When I speak about reliable network, we faced some cable cuts during the pandemic. So not having reliable network, not bringing the right internet, not bringing the right content to the country, and would definitely have a negative impact on the community in general. So reliable network is a key thing. Interconnection with the right partners, with the right IXs, with the right internet operators is key. Is very important, where operators have to look into that. Obviously, equipping with digital tools is definitely another thing that will help the community. More efforts into going into digital is required, such as portals, such as channels, sales channels. The customer should be able to help himself, to self-serve themselves, rather than going to the shop or calling. And I'm sure there is a lot of volume of calls happening to call centers. So digital channel is definitely a key element where operators must take to combat with the sudden change due to the pandemic.
Good. Thank you, Hani. Rashid Mohammed, he joined Betilco in 2005 as a network engineer. So he's spent now 14 years in the telecom field. He's recently appointed as the role of General Manager Network Division in 2019. He holds a master degree in engineering and management from Northumbria University, UK, and BSc in the electronic and communication engineering from Namibia University, UK. So he's a UK person. Now, he's also, of course, he's in charge of the network, so it means that the IXP is, and we are talking about the IXP, maybe you can shed some light on the role of IXP in bringing content to Bahrain. And I think the pandemic situation taught us a lesson that we needed a lot of content, and especially if you consider like two major industries, education and the health, of course. Those two major, and especially the education, we require a lot of content because now students are using, students and teachers are using the internet basically to teach. And if you don't have proper content, that is digitized content, then you don't have good enough education. So what would be the role of the IXP that you have built in Betilco to deal with this, to bringing the content to us?
Thank you, Mr. Rashid, and it's a pleasure to be with colleagues from across the industry. I'm honored to be here today. I think my colleagues touched on many topics, and rightly so, how COVID affected and how an internet exchange helps the data exchange and make it easily available with the right experience. Well, as an ISP, and before we are responsible for an IXP and an ISP here, and the expectation from our customers is bigger than ever. When I think when internet started in the old days, it was all about peer-to-peer and BitTorrent, and you could put a movie online and let it wait overnight and come the next day and try to watch it. You think about a few years back and until today, it's about video and how you can stream content, and we tried to solve this with a lot of caching and on YouTube, whether this is YouTube, Netflix, or other type of streaming content. But even with streaming, even if there is a latency in the connection, or the connection is, you still have a major buffer of the content, so you will not notice anything. Then came the online gaming, but this is a small community, but they are also really affected by latency and connection speeds. And if you have 200 milliseconds, and he loses the game in the middle of it, then you are a bad ISP and you are not satisfying his expectation. Then came the pandemic and brought all the online all the online workplace applications and internet content sharing real time. Now, all of this is, you talk about where does Microsoft Teams exist today, where Zoom exists today, or where even WhatsApp calling, for example, exists today, and how can we make sure that all of those exchanges happens locally, and even content. Some people mentioned education. If I'm a school and I want to publish something, so the more content we have within the region, within Bahrain, and also within the region, the more we're able to serve our customers and satisfy their experience without any latency. 100 milliseconds or 150 milliseconds, that's approximately where you want to push it. Otherwise, you start to feel latency in the applications. So as an IXP, we see the value in this. We are delivering these capabilities, and we are trying to help build the community and exchange information that is allow us to serve our customers with the right experience.
Thank you, Rashid. And you reminded me of this gaming when they lose for 200 milliseconds. So all my kids do that. Right, okay. Now let me introduce our third panelist, Hisham Ibrahim. Hisham is the External Relations Officer, Technical Advisor, Middle East Region, Program Manager at RIPE NCC. So he's in charge for training, programs, technical support, and relation with RIPE NCC for members and the MINOG community. We mentioned MINOG earlier, so he's MINOG guy here. Hisham brings over a decade of expertise in the field of internet technology and its governance. Prior to joining RIPE, Hisham held a number of senior technical, he held a senior technical position, including IPv6 program at Afrinic between 2010 and 14. He's a network operation center team leader in the Egyptian Ministry of Communication. So both from technical and policy background, Hisham is active on several communities in various network operator groups, peering forums, IPv6, task forces, and so he's a very, very active guy. We welcome you, and Hisham has an MSc in Electronic and Communication, as well as MBA in Marketing, so same as me, MBA in Marketing. Now, Hisham, we are talking about IXPs in here and the role of IXPs. So what is the role, from an outsider view, what is the importance of IXP for Bahrain?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me. Exchange points in general are are a crucial part of building the infrastructure in any country or in the region, for reasons that were mentioned better than I can at this point, mentioned by Naveed and others that spoke before me. But its importance plays in differently in the context of it. I've been hearing from the past panel to this one a lot of talk about COVID-19, and I think this is a bit like an eye-opener this year that made people look at things differently. And I'll mention how. So if we are talking about now enabling the infrastructure in a country to be able to support stuff like working from home, and I think somebody gave an example earlier about banking staff working from home, there needs to be consideration taking into what does that actually mean. And it doesn't just mean that they'll be able to connect to the internet, because when you work at a bank, you are actually behind a lot of equipment and thousands of dollars worth of security devices that are encrypting everything and making sure that your traffic isn't really, no deep packet inspection. Nobody can do that. Once you start disseminating into the country and working from different regions and different cities, it brings into a whole new discussion about what does this actually mean. And again, like I said, access is a part of it. But then again, you need to make sure that your communication, for example, stays within the country. And this is where something like an exchange point will come in play, right? Because if two staff from two different ISPs are talking to each other and there's no interconnection within the same country, and the traffic actually leaves the country, which in Bahrain sometimes it does, then all of a sudden your banking traffic is now exposed towards anybody doing something like this. Again, it would have been the same case before COVID-19, but again, with us re-examining and rethinking about this, I think it really needs us to take a good look at what does this mean at infrastructure in general. And again, access is just the first step towards that. This requires a lot of well, to begin with, a lot of measurements, right? Because you cannot actually, assess something or enhance it without being able to measure it. So you need to be able to see what performance do you have now, what vulnerabilities do you have now, and how to address them moving forward. I can elaborate a little bit more on these on the Q&A, but a big part of this is, again, re-examining the reasons why. So there were a lot of, in Naveed's the presentation earlier, he was talking about airports and giving examples and analogies about people traveling to multiple places. Before, there used to be a lot of reasons for doing this. And again, when I say before, I don't just mean COVID-19, but there were a lot of legacy issues for this. Cost of infrastructure may have been expensive. In a lot of the Middle East region, it was sometimes cheaper to buy a circuit all the way to London and back than to host something locally or interconnect locally. So a lot of people actually did that. Again, even with prices going down, sometimes they just lived over there, the content lived abroad, everything was there. Now with applications like gaming, with IoT, with smart cities, with the whole COVID, working from home stuff, it is making us really re-examine all this stuff and make sure that we have all the pieces in place, because if we don't, then you end up losing out. The internet performed better than anybody else could have imagined during this pandemic. Yes, there were upgrades, there were people rushing to fix things, but in general, the internet worked. We haven't heard in a country that the internet completely failed. There were cable cuts, there were, like I said, upgrades, but in general, everybody, I think, was impressed by how well the internet performed there. But moving forward, we need to really examine, do we have in place what can actually take us to digitization and other stuff? I'll stop my intervention here, and if there are questions, I'm happy to elaborate more.
That's good. Back to Hani. I mean, I have a question, maybe from from the participant in here. We're talking about, earlier we were talking about 200 milliseconds is too much for gamers. Somebody is saying, okay, I need 10 milliseconds for my games. So how is that possible today? Is it possible in Bahrain?
It is possible in Bahrain, definitely. It is possible.
What made it possible?
Some of the games already, as you are all aware, AWS is now hosted in Bahrain to serve the whole region, and AWS CloudFront has a lot of games embedded into their data centers. There are a few examples where people even from India started to access AWS in Bahrain. So there are possibilities to make 10 milliseconds. There are possibilities to reduce the definitely the latency. However, the challenging part becomes how can you localize those content? How can you attract those content into a country, for example, that serves 1 million or 1.5 million population? So you end up being in a chicken or egg situation.
Rashid, maybe can you explain how can we make more people or more service provider ISPs to become member in the IXP?
I think the benefit of that need to be surfaced. In general, as an example, I think Hani touched on it. Us being a partner of the IXP, we're able to access AWS content and get some games lower latencies. And my colleagues also, Hisham mentioned about some security measures that are necessary to be able to exchange data locally within Bahrain. So an IXP plays a big role in making sure that internet service stability and continuity and lower latencies are delivered. And the more participants we have on the community, the better the overall experience across all operators and service providers within Bahrain.
But Hisham, this is the last round of questions, but what is the status of IXPs in the region? Because you are in charge of the whole region in here. And maybe you and Naveed can answer this. But also, I think if we talk about it from legal perspective also.
Sure. So what I can say is, and I'll touch very quickly, Naveed has left, so I'll touch on something that he mentioned earlier. He put a slide up that showed MNOG, which is the Middle East Network Operator Group. MNOG was supposed to come to Bahrain earlier this year. We were hosted by the EBD, the Bahrain Executive Development Board, to actually come in this year and have the meeting. Unfortunately, COVID happened and that didn't happen, but we're postponing it to next year, inshallah. And the reason why I'm mentioning MNOG is MNOG has been around for over like 12 years, I think now, or maybe a little bit more. And since it started, it was just that network operator group. And we've been talking a lot about IXPs for a while. There were only a handful in the entire region. And by region, I mean Middle East and North Africa. Only as of late, and by late I mean the past 4 or 5 years, this IXP file has really been picked up in the region here. We're seeing now multiple IXPs per country. In Saudi, for example, there are 2 IXPs. There's one in Riyadh and there's one in Jeddah, with very different operating models and very different ways of governing them and establishing them. I can list a lot. There's like in Palestine, Lebanon, Kuwait started one a few years back. UAE here, Dubai has 2 exchanges. So you can really see the trend going up, and that tells you something by itself of the importance and them paying attention to this, which is one of the reasons why I was mentioning MNOG, because MNOG, like 2 or 3 years back, ended up rebranding itself not just as a network operator group, but also as the peering forum for the region, to address exactly the point that you asked both Hani and Rashid about, which is trying to build these communities, people with like-minded minds that are interested in stuff like gaming, interested in stuff like peering and better service delivery, interested in all these things, to actually come together and discuss how to better this on a regional level, on a national level, and even on an application level. So there's a lot of effort that's being done there. And again, a lot of progress, a lot of change. There's not enough time, unfortunately, to go into all of this. You mentioned very quickly on the legal perspective. I would like to say that also from a regulatory perspective, what we've seen in the region has been a very active change in attitude and how to deal with these things. Regulator now needs actually understands more than anybody else that they need to evolve quickly in their processes to cope with all the different changes and technologies that are happening. It cannot take years to make a decision on a certain technology anymore, because then the window would have passed. And what we've seen is a lot of regulators have relaxed a lot of the different things. Again, we've seen this in COVID, for example. I live in Dubai here. They opened up, for example, the Zoom applications and the voice over IP applications that were prior closed to enable the work from home bit. And again, that was a decision that the government made very quickly to enable stuff like this. Stuff related to hosting and licensing. Also, we see the governments are moving a lot faster than they did before. So the overall picture is quite positive, I would say. Again, we are seeing this culture being created at the operator level, at the government level, and at the user level. And the more the demand is happening, the more that we're going to be going in the right direction as well.
Just I'll take some questions from Q&A. I have one question from Muhammad Radi, and he's asking how, nowadays it's getting, the security is very important. So how we protect the internet? Hani, can you answer that, please? Hani, can you?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a number of measures of protecting internet. There are, and the different type of attacks are there, and the most popular attack is I would say the DDoS attack is one of the most popular attacks, which eats up the whole bandwidth of the, for example, of the internet service provider, and ends up with very bad experience to the end customers, maybe not even reaching their applications. So there are DDoS measures that operators do take. For example, in Betelco, maybe Rashid can even elaborate much more than me and the DDoS thing. We are taking serious measures on DDoS to protect all our customers, whether being consumer or wholesalers, operators. And these security measures are also applicable on our IXP in Manama Internet Exchange.
Okay. Just one other question, maybe, and I think we have overrun our session. So there's one question is from an anonymous attendee. Said, how do you think we can overcome the challenges of IXP, working separately and collaborate more on interconnecting them rather than competing? Bear in mind, our region is on a different level than Europe still. So anyone can take this, yeah? Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the major differences that we have in the Middle East here versus Europe is the fact that they can cross-border and build networks cross-border without any necessarily licensing or obstacles, which is making things a lot easier and a lot cheaper for them to operate there. Again, this ties back to the licensing regime, and it is, like I said, there is positive initiatives going in the right direction there. However, we are definitely still not at the level that you would see in Europe. And even, to be honest, because I do a lot of work in Africa as well, a lot of the African countries have even also overcome some of these issues as well. The positive note is, like I said, operators see the benefit of this. You can see some of the hubs emerging in the region here. For example, if you take UAE-IX as an example that I know quite dearly because I live in Dubai here, I can tell you for a fact that Omani, Saudi, Kuwaiti, and Emirati operators are interconnected connected there at the exchange. Again, there's a framework that adheres with the licensing and all the other regimes there, but there is definite efforts into making sure that we are interconnected. Do we need more? Yes, we do. Do we need to create at the ISP level more of a peering mentality than a wholesale mentality? Absolutely, but we're on the right track.
Good, thank you, Sham. This is the last question I will take from Basel Al-Arayad. What is telcos doing to keep content within Bahrain, and what is the regulator doing to help them?
Okay.
Can you, Hani and Rashid, maybe answer that? Rashid, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think maybe we'll go together with Hani, but first of all, I think it's very important to attract content to Bahrain that we have the right infrastructure. We have enough cable systems, we have diverse cable systems, we have data centers that we can host them and bring them on board. And we have sufficient calibration, I think, of users that will demand this content, maybe not only in Bahrain, but at least in within GCC, because that creates the volume that is required for big players to come and host services like they're doing in Europe or Far East or America or other parts of the country. On the regulatory part, I think maybe my colleagues can give shed some light on this.
Okay.
Hani?
All right. Yeah, I think we've heard yeah, Hani, do you have anything to add?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think we came to a close for this session. So I would say thank you to Naveed Al-Haq. Thank you, Hani, Askar, and Rashid Mohammed from Batilco. Thank you, Hisham from RIPE NCC. It's been a great session, and we would look forward to maybe see you again. Thank you all, and back to Jane. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rashid, and to all of our speakers. For our last session of the day, Measuring the Internet, I would like to introduce our moderator. He is the founder and CEO of EBX Labs and other technology companies. He is also part of Bahrain Technology Companies Society. Let me introduce to you our moderator for our session, Mr. Mirza Asrar Bai. Mr. Mirza.
Thank you, Jean. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Good. Thank you all for being here in this event. It's a remarkable event. I'll start by appreciating this whole effort by the Bahrain chapter of Internet Society. This is really wonderful to see with all this situation, you are still conducting it through this webinar, and it's going on so well, and so much participation and actions are there on this forum right now. The session which I'm supposed to be moderating is to measuring the internet. Jane mentioned in her keynote in the morning that there are multiple initiatives under this Measure the Internet, but they're right now only working on a few of them. This fourth industrial revolution may be pushing us as a society also to look and going across and measuring, maybe coming up with doing these initiatives much faster, because you know there's this saying, you cannot improve what you cannot measure. They also say it like this, that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So measuring the internet is really one of the most important aspects. To talk about it, first we will have a speaker. His name is Matt Ford. Let me introduce you. Matt is a technology program manager with Internet Society. He has been with Internet Society since September of 2008. He works in advancing and developing the development of open standards. He's also promoting the Internet collaborative development and operational management model. Matt has worked closely with Internet Research Task Force. This aspect where he works with them is to promote greater collaboration between the network research community and Internet Research Task Force. His background is very interesting for me also, because my background is information security, and Matt has been working on developing the network security designs. And he also has done work on R&D of IP mobility and IPv6. And most of all, the other area, which is again in line with my interest, is that he has been working on the developing the platforms which are supposed to demonstrate the results which come out of the research. So after Matt's talk, we will then do a panel discussion. In that panel discussion, I'll introduce you right now. George will be with us in that. George and me, we know each other from a long time. George was one of the very first security professionals in the region back in late 90s when I started working on information security. We have been working closely together, or sort of knowing each other. We have been working in different companies, but we have always been staying close. George is a seasonal CTO, along with being in cybersecurity. He has a lot of experience in blockchain, cloud computing, cybersecurity, disaster recovery, big data. George, another main thing to know about George is that he's always keen on getting into all the innovations. And he has been an advisor in more than 10 ICOs with very comprehensive understanding of application of risk on blockchain technology. So done with the introduction. I'll move on to Matt and say that, Matt, go ahead with your presentation. Let's see what you are supposed to be telling us today.
Okay, well, thank you for that nice introduction, Mirza. Let me share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. So it's an honor to have this opportunity to speak with you as part of this exciting event. We've heard already today from my colleagues about the importance of building and nurturing strong communities of humans in order to build strong community networks and a strong internet. I'd like to take this opportunity to talk about how we're also going to be using internet measurement to inform debates about the availability, performance, and security of the internet. At the Internet Society, we want to talk about the technologies that are important for the future of the network. And measurement's a tool that will help us greatly in understanding where we have work to do. At the Internet Society, we believe deeply that the internet must be open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy. Globally connected means that any part of the network can communicate with any other part using open standards and protocols. While no system as broad and diverse as the internet can be completely secure, vulnerabilities and threats must be mitigated to acceptable risk levels, and design and deployment of services must follow the best practices that we know. Trustworthiness requires the internet to work in a resilient, reliable, and accountable way that consistently meets users' expectations. These key aspects of a healthy internet that is open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy also serve to guide us in our identification of key technologies for the future of the internet, as it expands both in terms of the number of people and devices connected and in terms of the uses to which it's being put. I'll say more about these technologies shortly. I also want to mention our work to define and articulate what we call the internet way of networking, as this framework helps us to understand the positive or negative impact of ongoing internet infrastructure developments, and helps us to analyze novel proposals for regulation and other enhancements. The internet is obviously incredibly successful. It's a key technology underpinning radical changes in the way that we can communicate personally and do business. The COVID-19 pandemic has served to further entrench our reliance on the internet. If it were to suddenly disappear, our personal and professional lives would come grinding to a halt. And this raises an important question. What is it about the internet that made it a success? What are the critical elements of the internet? Our internet way of networking framework identifies the necessary characteristics that define the internet way of networking and tries to explain the value that each brings. We're focused here on the network of networks that is the internet, a voluntary interconnection of independent networks that together facilitate end-to-end communications through mutually agreed upon protocols accessible to all. The internet, operating with no central control and no blueprint, creates an unprecedented communication platform that's both easy to join and neutral regarding the traffic it carries and the applications that run on top of it. The framework identifies 5 elements that are critical to the internet way of networking. An open and accessible infrastructure with a common protocol provides reachability and connectivity, which in turn drive growth. Without this quality, users lose value, which ultimately drives them away and destroys the everyone is connected to everything value that the internet delivers. A layered architecture offering comm services provides for fast application development, increased innovation potential, and better security. Without this quality, applications cost more, take longer to come to market, and are less secure. Users don't see the benefits of rapid innovation, but pay a price through higher costs and less choice when the quality is removed. Decentralized management and distributed routing provides for agility and optimized connectivity. Without this quality, local needs are subsumed to some large one-size-fits-all plan. Users can't connect and extend the internet to meet their needs. Overall growth slows and becomes brittle. A global namespace and a global addressing space provides consistency and usability. Without a common global namespace, users are left uncertain and confused by an inconsistent experience. They ultimately lose trust in the overall network, waste resources trying to compensate, and the utility to everyone is reduced. And finally, a general purpose network provides an unfettered platform for innovation. Without this innovation, in new applications and uses of the network would not be possible. We would require multiple overlapping specialized networks, increasing costs and blocking competition, and new, more efficient uses of these resources. The openness of the network also brings another important ability that I want to focus on today, namely measurement. Internet protocols have included explicit measurement capabilities from the earliest days. In addition, the networking research and development community has not been shy about finding new and creative ways to measure the growth, functioning, and evolution of the global internet. It's trivial for any host to measure the time taken to send data to any other host, to observe oscillations in the time taken to send data, and to observe the frequency with which data packets are lost. These are all key measures of both the openness and performance of the network. At a macro level, measurement can tell us that the internet is composed of around 69,000 networks. Some of these are owned and controlled by the same organization, but mostly they are independent of each other. In that sense, there is no overall authority on the internet. Provided you can find a network to connect to, you can be on the internet. Another interesting thing about internet measurement is that the results of experiments are typically vantage point specific. This means that the answer you get depends on where you ask the question. Sometimes the difference between 2 vantage points is not very great or not significant, and sometimes it is. For this and other reasons, we like to present measurements based on data from multiple sources. Let's travel from the macro to the micro and take a look at some views of Bahraini internet infrastructure. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the Internet Society's focus is on an internet that's open, globally connected, secure, and trustworthy. And that helps guide us to interest in technologies that we believe are key to the future of the network. We're calling these enabling technologies because they enable the continued growth and positive evolution of the internet along the dimensions that we care about. They include IPv6, a technology that's fundamental to scaling the internet to support a human and device population in the trillions. Security technologies like DNSSEC that improve the integrity of the naming infrastructure, or secure HTTP that improve the security and trustworthiness of the web infrastructure are also vital to the future that we want to see. As far as IPv6 deployment is concerned, we can obtain data from several vantage points. For example, Facebook, Akamai, Google, and APNIC all provide information about IPv6 deployment on Bahraini networks. And I'm afraid to say that I don't have a very good story to tell about that. There's certainly lots of work to do here. By way of encouragement, I'll take this opportunity to highlight a recent observation from Apple, who commented that connection setups are 1.4 times faster on average for IPv6 connections than for IPv4 connections. So there's a very real and measurable potential benefit to Bahraini internet users from deploying IPv6. It would be wonderful to see some Bahraini network operators joining the ranks of World IPv6 launch participants and sharing their deployment progress publicly as encouragement to others. DNSSEC is an important technology for securing the integrity of the Internet's naming infrastructure, the Domain Name System, or DNS. The importance of DNSSEC deployment relates directly to the security and trustworthiness of the common global namespace I mentioned earlier. The story with regard to DNSSEC deployment in Bahrain is slightly better than the IPv6 story, but still not great, unfortunately. The .bh zone is signed, but there is no DS record in the root zone. What this means in practical terms is that while some steps have been taken to deploy DNSSEC for the .bh zone, it still isn't possible for owners of .bh domains to sign their zones and leverage a trusted and secure delegation path from the root of the DNS tree. Again, there's more work to be done here, but hopefully the remaining steps required for Bahrain to attain the status of having operational DNSSEC deployment can be accomplished fairly quickly. In our work on the Internet Resilience focus area, we're concerned with creating an index for things like the diversity of the ISP landscape, diversity of upstream networks and international connectivity infrastructure, the presence of IXPs and local hosting infrastructure. These elements and more all contribute to the overall picture of a country's internet infrastructure resilience. I'm pleased to say that on all of these counts, Bahrain today displays increasingly healthy signs of a resilient, diverse, and vibrant local internet economy. I'd love to hear more of your observations on this point, because I'm sure that there are many in the audience with local perspectives that could help to flesh out this very brief pencil sketch of Bahrain's internet infrastructure. To help us track and share these important measures of local and global internet dynamics and evolution, starting this year, we are building a platform to share insights into aspects of the internet that we care passionately about. We're doing this to try to bridge the gap between the world of academic networking research and non-scientific audiences like journalists, public policymakers, and the research teams. We're the Internet Society, and so quite naturally, we aspire to be a trusted source of information about the internet. We want to make good, relevant data and helpful interpretations of that data easier to find, share, and to reuse. And in the spirit of reuse, we want to help inform and support other Internet Society projects and communities of interest. To help everyone gain deeper insights into the internet infrastructure and its future, we're building a tool that consolidates trusted third-party internet measurement data, such as that I've already shared with you, from various sources into a single platform. We'll use this data to examine trends, generate reports, and tell data-driven stories. This is definitely not a science project, but it is about building a tool to help communicate valuable insights into the present and possible futures of the internet, both globally and from more local perspectives. The platform will be available to everyone everywhere so that policymakers, researchers, journalists, network operators, and civil society groups and others can better understand the health, availability, and evolution of the internet. To begin with, we're building the platform around 4 focus areas, namely enabling technologies, the internet way of networking, internet shutdowns, and internet resilience. For this last focus area, we're beginning by shining a spotlight on the African continent, where questions about infrastructure resilience are perhaps most acute. As I mentioned, we plan to work with partners to access important data sources. We'll consume and process this third-party data and use existing measurements to make our presentations and generate our insights. We will promote the internet measurement community and the results of their work in several key venues like RightsCon, the Internet Research Task Force, academic conferences, and other venues. We're building the Insights platform to be modular and extensible, driven by the focus areas I've mentioned, with the intention to add to these as time goes by. And I'd really love to hear your ideas for measurements or new focus areas that we could be developing, presenting, and seeking data partners for. What would help your understanding of the internet globally in your region and in your country? We expect to launch our Insights platform before the end of this year, so watch this space, as they say. Well, that concludes my presentation for today. I've shared the key goals of the Internet Society and the relevance of our Internet way of networking framework, but mostly I've tried to talk about the measurements and the new Insights platform that we're building. I hope you found some of what I've had to say of interest, and I look forward to hearing your comments or questions about our plans to do our part to help shape our understanding of the present and future of the internet infrastructure. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Matt. That was insightful. I learned a lot. I hope all the participants are getting the complete picture of why it is so important to measure the internet. I look at it also from the aspect of this fourth industrial revolution, and like so many of the panelists and the speakers today were talking about the COVID-19 effect, which has pushed us into adopting and using more internet as we go forward. Now we have to do it at a much faster pace. In that aspect, this, George, if I want to bring you in, what do you see as the part of internet expansion which is going on, and how can we be measuring it where it will give value to us in understanding of this fourth industrial revolution and the expansion of internet?
Yes, first, thank you very much, Internet Society and the team here for the chance to be here. I do believe there's two or several important aspects that need to be addressed. One is definitely the measurement, but the measurement by itself is a passive role. I do believe that ISPs and others need to play also a proactive role in delivering a much better user experience. Internet, like our roads or others, is a shared resource. It's more than a shared resource. It has become a critical resource for our daily lives. Daily lives to conduct e-commerce, daily lives to get a ride, if you're using Uber or other technologies, to get health treatments or health information and up-to-date information, or even to earn a living. For some people, Zooming has become the new way to deliver their content and continue their jobs in a remote way. However, even today, the internet has many types of traffic. Some traffic is delivering good utility. Other traffic is simply of a parasite nature, meaning especially things like downloading, for example, pirated movies using torrent technology. I'm not saying that we should necessarily block all of that, but at least ISPs and others should take proactive action, potentially about packet shaping and prioritizing traffic for the things that actually deliver service to the citizens and the users of the internet. So that means if we are conducting this live Zoom session with over 100 attendees, they should experience a good video feed without interruption and good quality of sound and good resolution, and give much lower priority to less useful or less critical activities that are happening at the same time, and maybe relegate these activities to periods of time where the internet is not at its peak usage, and then leverage that bandwidth at that point in time. So I think we have to.
Is it being done somewhere in this manner? Is it? Are they doing it like this somewhere at the moment? Do you know?
There is parts of the world where this has been done in an active way. Certainly one place is the United Arab Emirates, which is very sensitive about the traffic that is being generated, and therefore does packet shaping for a lot of the traffic that is being passed through the networks. Saudi Arabia does this as well to some extent, but primarily with some filtering in mind. And then there's even countries that are on the borders of our region, like Pakistan, that have now been involved in doing this because the growth of video sessions has been so big that it has put an extreme pressure on the demands of the network. And you have to keep in mind that the average user watching this session may not necessarily be at home. He may be on these 3G or 4G network.
In a way, what you're saying is throttling the traffic. Certain type of traffic should be throttled. Matt, what do you think on this aspect, that network traffic should be throttled to improve the internet?
Well, it's interesting how quickly network operators and regulators reacted when the COVID-19 crisis hit. It was very encouraging to see actions like additional frequency being made available, the requests to Netflix to reduce their streaming rates and so on. So I think people do understand collectively the value that they get from the internet and the importance that the role that it plays in their social and business lives. And you know, so that responsiveness is very, very encouraging. I think that it's also interesting that at least I mean, I'm based in the UK, and I think in Western Europe and the US, the experience has been somewhat similar in the sense that traffic levels increased dramatically, but by and large, networks mostly coped with that. And I think that's perhaps in the main because the networks in many regions have been built to handle very high video bit rates, and so once those networks are built, you know, there's only so much video you can watch, right? And so if everybody's kind of watching video, using video conferencing applications most of the time in their daily lives, that you know, you've already built a network that's capable of delivering that quality of service and that level of service. Where we've seen much more pressure, I think, is in other regions where the infrastructure isn't at that point yet, and then clearly more sort of more invasive action is necessary to maintain the network's functioning.
Yeah, I think in Europe it was the host Netflix-like. They reduced the resolution of the streaming of the movies so that they would be consuming less bandwidth. Okay, we'll move on to another aspect. You know, the people take it for granted that internet is there. A lot of this is not understood by many people, that what goes in the back in building this infrastructure. And I think it was Ritu in the earlier sessions, she mentioned that in India, the quality of internet is only good for about 20% of the users, which are more, I think, in the urban areas and rural areas. If they even have internet, the quality is very low. So when it comes to this measurement aspect, how are we measuring, or do we have anything with Internet Society that you will also be looking at, not only the measurement of the internet in terms of penetration, but also the quality?
Yeah. One of our intentions is to sort of combine a metric that looks at the state of internet infrastructure in terms of international connectivity, the presence of IXPs and so on, but also the actual quality of connections to end users. And so we want to combine those various aspects of internet resilience to build a picture of the overall quality of internet in specific regions and countries. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's not, you know, none of these aspects that we've been discussing, whether it's you know, fiber deployment or 4G and 5G networks or IXPs, none of these things is sufficient in and of itself. You need the combination across the board. And it's fair to say that measuring internet quality of service and performance in terms that, you know, the average end user would appreciate is actually quite a sophisticated business. And if you look at programs like Measuring Broadband America, for example, they've developed quite a sophisticated methodology where they have probes on every tier of service for every ISP that they want to measure, conducting multiple measurements, you know, 24/7. And so it can be quite an expensive and quite a labor-intensive exercise if you want to have a really thorough measurement of, you know, the entire you know, access and ISP network provision in the country. But some regulators clearly see that as an important exercise to maintain, you know, maintain market efficiency and so on.
Great.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do believe that probes are very important, and I believe probes not just down to the ISP level, but probes down to the user level. Because at the end of the day, many times we say the ISP, the lights are green, but what the user experience is not the same. And what I mean by the user experience is the user experience based on the applications they're using. So whether it happens to video, audio, messaging, or just traditional internet surfing. So that has to be allowing a little bit like the happiness factor to be factored in. So that means users, when they use the applications, they'll be able to communicate back, yes, this was a good experience or not, collect the statistics, apply some big data and AI on it, and then start understanding the patterns of what is causing the ups and downs in satisfaction. Maybe sometimes it may not necessarily be network clogging. It may be malware that is being distributed and causes a lot of extraneous traffic at periods in time. And so it may be zombie traffic, not necessarily real internet traffic. So these probes will help us to do a much more thorough job and create then the necessary dashboards so that people can have access to them on a real-time basis.
So this is crowdsourcing in a way, right? So Matt, yes. Do you have a program as a crowdsourcing where people can actually participate in helping the measurement of the internet from our part of the world also?
Yeah, we're not building our own measurement infrastructure because we don't want to reinvent the wheel effectively. Because if you look at the RIPE NCC, they have an infrastructure called Atlas, where through a combination of hardware and software probes and what they call anchors, they have some very good measurement coverage of networks around the world, including in the Middle East, and there are a handful of probes in Bahrain, but there could certainly be more. So as I said, on our internet resilience focus, we're looking initially to start with Africa because we thought that if we can do anything useful in Africa, it will probably be easier elsewhere because the challenges in Africa are so great. And so there we are looking to support the targeted deployment of additional RIPE Atlas probes. So we're looking to leverage the excellent work that RIPE NCC have done building their Atlas infrastructure. And if you're not familiar with that and you are interested in measurement, I'd really encourage you to take a look because it's a very powerful system. So we're looking to basically leverage the work that they've done and support their work to in a sense, expand their coverage area to new regions. And that would ultimately include the Middle East as well.
That would be based on collaboration at the telecom level?
Well, it can be. I mean, as I say, they have both software and hardware probes. So individuals can obtain a probe from RIPE NCC and install it on their home connection or in the office, or an ISP that wants to contribute measurements can do the same and place a probe in their data center or install the software on existing hardware that they have in their data centers.
Okay. I see some questions have popped up from the audience and participants. In fact, the first question is from Saleh, and Saleh is asking, when can we expect internet free like air? So Saleh, I will comment before I ask my panelists to comment on it. If you know Elon Musk, he has this project called Starlink through his SpaceX missions. And in that Starlink, he has already sent in, I think, up till now, around 480 satellites. Every time his spacecraft goes up, about 60 satellites come out of it. His initial target was to put in 12,000 low orbit satellites, which now he's increasing to around 42,000 low orbit satellites, which should give free internet to everybody anywhere in the world. George, your comment on the free internet.
Nothing is ever free in the sense that even Elon Musk is a businessman. So obviously the intentions may be good. And I do believe in what I call affordable internet access. And affordable may mean free or almost free in some parts of the world because of the capacity of that population to pay for internet. So I do believe internet should be like a human right, the same way you should have no discrimination, access to health, food, and all. Internet has become kind of a necessity because we use it for everything in our lives. However, when you see free, the same way Google is free, but there's a heavy price to pay for any of the free technologies. And I think sometimes the price of privacy is a bit too high. So I think we have to strike the proper balance between what we sometimes call free and the adequate protection of the individual's right to privacy in the usage of their data. And I think obviously there is very big evolution in that. Europe has been a leader in this with GDPR. And more recently, we have the ISO 277 standard series to deal with privacy and actually taking it one step further. So privacy on the internet is obviously a key important element to establish the right trust level as well.
But yes, you're right. It's not free, just like Facebook and any other things we use it. They're all data companies and we give them data and they allow us to use those platforms. Matt, do you see this as a feasible thing eventually? Like because this will help the Internet Society if the project actually goes live, everything is fine, then internet is present in every single square kilometer of the world, anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a great thing, I think. There's, I don't think it's likely ever to be free. And if it is free of charge, we'll certainly pay for it in some other ways, Jorge has identified. But, I think some things are, cost so relatively little that you don't think about the expense. And that's not the case for internet in many parts of the world. And so, riffing off my colleagues working on community networks, that's really what we're about there, is trying to make the internet more affordable in places where it really isn't for very many people. And so, because the more central internet services become to people's lives, the more serious a problem the digital divide becomes. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us that benefit so greatly from the internet to address that challenge, either by subsidizing services or building them in such a way that they don't place such a heavy financial burden on those places where economic resources are scarce.
Yeah,
actually, I agree with Matt, and I take it even one step further. If we look at the price of 1 megabit in a place like Amsterdam, it's maybe $10 or something. In Africa, where the purchasing power is much lower, the same bandwidth is between 100 and 1,000. So the people that can afford the least are actually paying even more than the people that can afford it and are paying less. So I do believe that there is some leveling that needs to take off through subsidizing or other mechanisms to allow kind of an equitable access to that shared resource. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Let's move on the same side, but let's move on to some subject or aspect which is of interest to all three of us: security. Because when we talk about the resilience of the internet, do we think that having more or adequate security will enable more penetration of the internet, will be able to remove all the rogue traffic from the internet? George?
I believe that trust and security is a key element for the survivability of the internet itself. Don't assume that the internet that we have today is going to remain forever as we see it. Today, people are creating alternative versions of the internet based on blockchain technology that could, if they become successful enough, replace the internet overnight, or at least the internet as we know it today. So I do believe that the original internet was not necessarily built with trust in mind, and trust was added as kind of a quilt patchwork afterwards, kind of a band-aid approach. And that's why we have a lot of problems. We have problems with trust, digital access, identity management, distributed denial of service, just to name the tip of the iceberg. So in any of those areas that we are not addressing successfully, that means we cannot conduct e-commerce. We cannot conduct successful financial transactions. So that means the same utility that the internet is giving us is being taken away at the same time. Maybe I'll try to put this in the car analogy. So if you think of the car goes on the road. So you expect the road to be safe and to be relatively flat. If the road is full of nails all over the place, people will stop driving on the road or will have to change the kind of tires they use because it's simply not a practical use of the road anymore for them. So the same thing needs to be done on the internet. We need to take concrete actions to address these existing issues of identity management, privacy, distributed denial of service attacks. Mirza, you're on mute.
Sorry. Matt, would you like to add something to this on the same security side? Do you think that there are areas with which we should be addressing it?
Well, yeah, I think I agree with Jorge in the sense that, you know, with a system as diverse as the internet, it can't be made completely secure, but we have to mitigate risks to acceptable risk levels. I think things are much better now than they were 20 or 10 years ago. So it's incremental progress, and a piece of that that's absolutely key is sharing best practice. And so the network operator groups that my colleague Naveed spoke about are a key component of that. You know, mitigating the opportunities for DDoS attacks and other you know, security threats to be realized by spreading best practice, helping people understand how to mitigate these things when they occur is really key. So so I'm afraid it's going to be an ongoing challenge, but one that I think that over time we get progressively better at.
Okay.
I want to add two other things that are actually quite important here. See, we have an extreme growth in financial services. So we saw the birth of what we call the neobank, or more reality, sometimes we call it the virtual bank. That means a bank without an office, without bricks and mortar. So that means people are conducting all their financial transactions via the internet, whether it's open a bank account, get a loan, or make a payment transfer. So the trust of the internet becomes more important. That's example number one. Example number two, which is as critical, is as we move towards more smart cities. That means all this data of the smart city is going to find itself on the internet. And what is this data of the smart city? Is the data that controls the traffic lights. It's the data that controls the water supply, electricity, smart meters. It's the data that allows us to operate on a day-to-day basis. And if we're building this on an infrastructure that does not have the right elements of trust, then the ground layer needs to be solidified a little bit more.
Okay. See, thank you, George. Let's move on to another focus area of the internet measurement, which the society has, and which is really the shutdown, internet shutdown. I actually have somebody even asking a question in the same aspect. There is Abdul Fateh Salman, who asked that. Dr. Abdul Fateh Salman is from UEB, University of Bahrain. And he's asking what happens if one fine day we wake up and there is no internet? What will happen to our data documents? How do you expect or imagine the humanity without the internet? This means these shutdowns, what I think his question really is, what is the impact of the shutdown? Matt?
Right, and the impacts are very severe in many cases, both to the economy and to the individuals in their social and business lives. And so one of the key things that we want to highlight this year is those impacts where these shutdowns are occurring, and allow some of this sort of human interest stories to emerge, really to put pressure on the actors that engage in these shutdowns, so that we can understand better, you know, what are the motives driving them, and can we address them in a different way? Because I think that it's unarguable that just completely closing the internet for large sections of the population is unacceptable. And the impact is particularly severe if you consider something like the COVID-19 pandemic, where people absolutely depend on getting access to health information about the locality and so on. But we've also seen perverse situations where once the internet is shut down, you don't actually have the ability to get unbiased information from sources like Wikipedia to counter the rumors that you're hearing locally. So it can actually be very, very counterproductive. So yeah, we're looking to expose those impacts and hopefully do something to address them.
Okay.
We have actually an example where this happened. If you remember a few years ago, when Estonia got attacked because of some political disruptions, they got shut down for almost 3 weeks. Estonia is a European country that everything is electronic. People do their financial transactions electronic. They even vote electronically from home by using smart cards. So for them, internet is a critical resource to allow the country to operate. So it needs to be protected and defended in the correct way. Otherwise, the country cannot perform its day-to-day functions.
Yeah, for the participants, I can tell them that there are these movies. I remember I watched, it was by National Geographic. It was, I think, American Blackout and UK Blackout. There were two movies or one movie, but there was movies like that by National Geographic, which show you the scenario that the day the internet is out, what happens. And they do that through some cyber attack happens and electricity grid is out and then everything is out. And then how people are able to, yes, it's a scenario, but then there are all these resilience, and this is why we have the part of the resilience in the internet. And I'm sure this is why also the society has this measurement of the resilience side of it. Let me look at more questions. I know we are running out of time, but I'll try to look into more questions. Question by Mohammed Radi is, how can we speed up the IPv6 development around the world? How can we speed up? I think by just simply adopting it. I think people should be more aware and start adopting. I think Matt also touched on it, and in Bahrain, we need to do more on this side. George, you should be.
It's very, I think technology, there's what I sometimes call push and pull. Push means you have a technology that is the greatest thing, like IPv6, and you're trying to push it on people to adopt it. Push does not always work. Pull is a much better approach. That really means as IoT, smart cities, and others become more prevalent, what I call the Internet of Things means the health sensors, smart wearables, and so on. This needs IPv6. So then it becomes a pull effort. So you don't have to ask people to have IPv6. You're going to run out of IP addresses, so you have no choice. So the usability case should drive the use of the technology, not the other way around. So this creates a pull effect, which means it's based on a direct benefit of the technology rather than say, oh, it's good, we should use it.
Yeah. Thank you, George. I'm trying to look up at any other question which we could be putting, which is relevant to I'm only trying to look out of the question which is more relevant to our session. Jean, how much time can we still take more?
One last question, sir, and then we're gonna wrap up.
Okay, thank you. So is there a reference on those local offline internet sources when the internet cuts? Maybe it could operate on a national level for some source, such as replicated Wikipedia, replicated LinkedIn. So somebody's asking that, what in those cuts can we have internet still functioning and there are more replicas? It's like more having a disaster recovery center, but national level.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
I have seen projects like that where it's sort of internet in a backpack, you know, where you can create a wireless, a Wi-Fi hotspot with access to, you know, previously downloaded resources from Wikipedia and other places, and they're being used in you know, disaster zones of one kind or another, and refugee camps and so on. So yeah, there are people thinking along those lines. It would be nice though not to create the need for those things by shutting down the internet. You know. So
George, you
I believe in the approach, what I call a cyber drill approach. I mean, it's a fire situation, and then you do the building evacuation to see if you can actually evacuate in time. And there has been two cases, at least well documented, where this has been done. The first one was during the Estonia cyber attack. The first 2 weeks, they were attacked from the outside. So Estonia decided to cut itself out from the internet. So from the second week, they were running only Estonia as a separate country. So the internet was only internal to them. The second major country that has done a test similar more recently, and probably in the last 1 year, was Russia. And Russia disconnected itself from the internet for a period of time to demonstrate that if for whatever reason there was going to be a cyber war scenario that would attack their infrastructure, they will be able to continue to use the internet at home without any external links. It's not the optimal solution, but at least it proves that if you do the right cyber drills, you can achieve that level of continuity, because that's what is needed. So you can continue to function as a country and the individuals in the country or the citizens can continue to get the services.
Great. Thank you, my esteemed panelists. And thank you again for the Internet Society Bahrain Chapter for organizing this. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everybody else had a good use out of this. Over to you, Jean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mirza. We would like to thank Internet Society, BTEC, WorkSmart, and Ministry of Transportation and Telecommunications for supporting us in today's event. To conclude the event, let me introduce Mr. Ali Al-Mishal, the Vice President of Internet Society Bahrain Chapter. Mr. Ali.
Thanks a lot, Jane. I'm sure that all of you agree with me. We have an amazing panelists, speakers, as well as our moderators with a great session. So that's an amazing event in one day and as an e-meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to take this opportunity to send our appreciation and gratitude to His Excellency Engineer Kamal bin Ahmed Mohammed, Minister of the Transportation and Telecommunication, for being the event patron. Thanks and appreciation goes to the Internet Society for their generous support from different perspectives. Not to forget our sponsors, partners, and organizer team, whom without their efforts and contributions, this would not have been happened in the way we all have enjoyed. Thanks a lot for all of you as an organizers and partner sponsors. Last but not least, our panelists and speakers, whom have enlightened us and shed some lights on very interesting topics and what's going on around the world. It's a very diversified session, people from all over the world, different countries, different nationalities, which is the great and the power of the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, thank you a lot and looking to see you hopefully very soon in the real world. Thanks a lot and see you soon.